Today, I want to share a story so brutal, it left scars on the land itself. A tale carved into the dust of the Wild West. This was a place where men survived on stubborn pride, where love could be as dangerous as a loaded gun, and where fate waited patiently for the moment to strike. It started with something small, just one man coming back to claim a dying ranch. But that single decision would unleash betrayal, blood, and a truth buried far deeper than gold. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. They say the hardest part of the West isn't riding away. It's riding back and facing the ghosts you left buried in the dust. Wade Kellen didn't return to Purgatory Creek seeking mercy or reunion. He came to put his father in the ground and unload the sun-bleached acres of the Double M Ranch, the land that had split his family clean in two. He expected trouble with the bank. He expected cold stares from a town that barely remembered his name. What he didn't expect was to open the door of his childhood home and find it already occupied. Standing in the hallway was Mara Quinn, a widow with a loaded Winchester cradled in her arms, and a secret powerful enough to shake the Wyoming Territory to its roots. This wasn't some tender frontier romance. It was the truth of how a hardened cowboy came home to settle old business and found himself dragged into a war over the woman who once tore his heart apart. The Wyoming wind didn't simply blow. It carved. It scraped the high desert raw, peeling paint from walls and faith from men who stayed too long. Wade tugged the brim of his Stetson lower, eyes narrowed against the stinging dust as his roan gelding, Ash, climbed the final ridge. Below him stretched the Double M. From a distance, the ranch looked less like a homestead and more like a wound in the earth. The main house, once a proud two-story frame of white timber, sagged beneath years of neglect, its boards gray and flaking, leaning west as though exhausted from fighting the wind. The corral fences gaped like broken teeth, and the windmill screamed in rusted protest, its cry echoing through the canyon like a warning no one heeded. Wade shifted in the saddle, worn leather groaning beneath him. He was 32, but a decade pushing cattle from Texas to Montana had carved him into something older, harder. A Colt Peacemaker rested on his hip, the bluing worn thin from use, not show. He wasn't a gunman by choice, but in the territories the line between a rancher and a killer was thin as a trigger pull. He hadn't stepped foot on this land since the night of the fire, the night he and his father, Harlan Kellen, had come to blows. Wade had ridden out bleeding, swearing never to return. Now Harlan was dead. Heart failure, the telegram said. A lonely end for a man who never learned how to love. Easy, Ash, Wade muttered, guiding the horse down the switchback trail. Purgatory Creek lay 5 miles east, but he had no interest in town yet. First, he needed to see what his past had left him. He wanted to know whether anything here could still be saved, or whether he should sign the deed over to the bank and disappear north again. When he rode into the yard, silence wrapped around him like a shroud. Not the calm of nature, the silence of abandonment. Weeds climbed waist-high around the porch. A rusted plow lay half swallowed by dirt, the bones of a forgotten age. Wade swung down and tied Ash to the last solid rail on the hitching post. He climbed the steps, boots thudding against warped boards. The door handle was cold beneath his palm. He pushed. The hinges screamed in protest. Inside, the air was stale, years trapped in dust and old tobacco. But beneath it lingered something else, a scent that struck him hard in the chest. Lavender? Beeswax? Wade froze, fingers drifting instinctively toward his revolver. That scent didn't belong here. It belonged to a memory he'd spent 10 years trying to drown in whiskey and work. "Who's there?" he called, voice rough. From the parlor shadows, a woman stepped forward into a blade of afternoon light, cutting through the filthy window pane. The breath left his lungs. She wore a black morning dress, high-collared and severe, but it did nothing to tame the fire burning in her green eyes. Time had sharpened her, softened nothing. And she was aiming a double-barreled shotgun straight at his chest. "You're trespassing," she said. Her voice was steady, cold as mountain water. "Mara," Wade whispered, ignoring the barrels leveled at him. Mara Quinn, born Mara Sterling, the girl he'd sworn to marry, the woman who promised she'd wait, the one who married Rufus Quinn, the wealthiest merchant in town, 6 months after Wade rode away. "I said you're trespassing," she repeated, though the gun trembled just slightly. "State your business or leave this land." "My business?" Wade let out a dry, humorless laugh. "I'm Wade Kellen. This is my father's house. That makes it mine." She didn't lower the weapon. "Harlan is dead, Wade. We buried him 3 days ago, up on the hill." "I was 3 states away when the wire came," Wade said, stepping forward slowly. "You know I would have come?" "Put the gun down, Mara. I'm not here to hurt you." "I don't know you anymore," she snapped. "The man I knew wouldn't have left his father to rot alone for 10 years. That man made his choice," Wade growled, old fury flaring hot in his chest. "And I made mine," she shot back. "But the law doesn't change. You're still the heir." Her eyes hardened. "So tell me, why are you standing in my house? Did Rufus send you to collect some debt your father owed?" At the sound of her husband's name, her composure cracked. Pain flashed across her face, raw and unguarded, before she could hide it. She eased the shotgun down at last, resting it against a dust-coated armchair. "Rufus is dead, Wade," she said quietly. "He passed last winter, influenza." The fire drained from Wade's chest, replaced by a slow, unsettled ache. I didn't know," he said. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Mara replied, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "He was a good man. Better than most." Her gaze swept over Wade, the grit on his coat, the revolver riding low on his hip. "And I'm not here to collect any debt," she added. "I live here." Wade blinked. "You... what?" "I moved in 6 months ago to care for Harlan." For a moment, the room tilted beneath his boots. "You took care of my father?" "He hated the Sterlings. He hated nearly everyone," she said evenly. "But he was sick, Wade, and he was alone. Someone had to stay." She crossed the room to the heavy oak desk in the corner, the place Harlan once ruled like a battlefield, and lifted a thick envelope sealed with red wax. "You really think you can ride back in here, shake the trail dust off your coat, and sell this land to the highest bidder?" Mara asked, holding it out. "You think it's that simple?" she pressed. "It should be," Wade replied carefully. "I'm his son." "Then read it." Wade took the envelope. His fingers fumbled as he cracked the wax seal and unfolded the parchment inside. The handwriting was unmistakable, formal, precise, the mark of Judge Silas Crow, the only man within 100 miles who knew the law well enough to twist it tight. His eyes skimmed the legal language until they reached the heading, "Last Will and Testament." "I, Harlan Kellen, being of sound mind, do hereby bequeath the Double M Ranch, including all livestock, water rights, and permanent structures." Wade stopped, read it again, then a third time. "This can't be right," he muttered. "It is," Mara said, folding her arms. "He changed it 2 weeks before he died. The ranch hadn't been left to Wade alone. It was to be divided equally between Wade Kellen and Mara Quinn, caretaker and companion, on the condition that both reside on the land and work it together for 1 full year to restore its profitability. If either party left or failed, their share would be forfeited to the other. Wade lifted his head, the paper trembling in his grip. He chained us together. He knew you'd try to sell and run, Mara said without satisfaction. And he knew I had nowhere else to go after the bank took Rufus's store. He planned it, Wade, every bit of it. Even from the grave, Harlan Kellen was still pulling the reins. Wade looked around the decaying room, then at the woman who had once shattered his heart. And finally, at the document that locked them inside his father's final cruelty. I won't do it, he said. I'll contest the will. You can try, Mara replied. But the Cattlemen's Exchange out of Cheyenne is sending inspectors on Friday. If there isn't a working management plan by then, they foreclose on the liens Harlan took out. We lose everything. You lose your inheritance, and I lose the only roof I have left. She stepped closer, her green eyes burning into his. You ran once, Wade. Are you going to run again? Or are you finally going to stay and fight? The silence that followed settled thick as gun smoke. Wade studied her face, the exhaustion beneath her strength, the calluses on hands that once played piano. How much? He asked quietly. How much is the lien? Mara turned toward the window, staring out at the weeds swallowing the yard. $3,000. Harlan borrowed it during the drought of '81 to dig new wells. He never found water, she continued. The money just vanished. $3,000. A fortune. A cowboy earned $30 a month if he was lucky. To pay that debt would take a miracle, or a strike of gold. And who holds the note? Wade asked. Clayton Varr. The name landed like a hammer. Varr wasn't a banker. He was a vulture. A former rustler who'd cleaned his blood money just enough to pass for respectable, and now controlled nearly everything north of Purgatory Creek. If Clayton Varr owned the lien, he didn't want repayment. He wanted the land. Specifically, the water rights running through the Double M. Wade rubbed his jaw. If Varr wants this place, he won't wait for us to fail. No, Mara said softly. He'll make sure we do. She hesitated. 2 weeks ago, someone cut the north fence. We lost 20 head of cattle. Harlan, Wade murmured. The stress is what triggered the final attack. Cold anger tightened around Wade's chest like iron wire. His father may have been a hard, bitter man, but he was still a Kellen. And being slowly driven to death by pressure and fear was still murder, no matter how clean it looked on paper. I need to see Judge Silas Crow, Wade said, stuffing the folded will into his coat pocket. I need to know if this document is airtight. It is, Mara answered. But go. Ride into town. Then she added, her tone firm, just remember, the guest room's at the end of the hall. And don't even think about sleeping in Harlan's room. I haven't touched his things yet. I'm not sleeping here, Wade said instantly. The will says you have to reside on the property, she replied calmly. Tonight counts. Wade muttered a curse under his breath, spun on his heel, and stormed out. The ride into Purgatory Creek passed in a blur of anger and cold calculation. The town looked nearly the same. Worn, faded, stubbornly alive. The Rising Sun Saloon still needed paint. The general store still leaned beneath its crooked sign. But something had changed. People watched him as he rode down the main street, not with curiosity, but with caution, as if trouble had just come back to town wearing a familiar face. Wade tied Ash outside the law office, a squat brick building beside the sheriff's station. Inside, Judge Silas Crowe sat behind his desk, round-bellied and sweating inside a cheap suit, nursing a glass of sherry. "Wade," the judge wheezed without standing. "Heard you rode in. My condolences about your father." "Spare me," Wade snapped, slamming the folded will onto the desk. "Is this real? Did he actually leave half the ranch to her?" Silas adjusted his spectacles. "Perfectly legal. Signed, witnessed by Sheriff Boonhart and myself. Your father was resolute. Said he owed Mrs. Quinn a great debt." "A debt?" Wade scoffed, pacing the cramped office. "She married the man who bought me out of everything. Why would my father care about her?" The judge sighed, poured another glass, and slid it across the desk. "Sit down, son." Wade didn't move. "Talk." "When Rufus Quinn died, Mara was left with nothing," Silas said quietly. "The bank seized the store, the house, everything. She was sleeping in the livery stable." Wade froze. "Your father found her there," the judge continued. "He brought her home. She cooked, cleaned, read to him when his eyesight failed, kept that place livable." Silas met Wade's eyes. She became the daughter he wished he'd had. The daughter who stayed. The words burned. Wade drained the sherry in one swallow. "And Clayton Varr?" Wade asked sharply. "Does he know about this arrangement?" Silas nodded grimly. "He does, and he's furious. He expected to foreclose the moment Harlan died. But with you back, and the will tying the land up for a year, Varr's blocked, for now." The judge leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Watch your back, Wade. Varr's hired a new foreman." "What's his name?" "Rake. Gunman from south of the border, mean, patient, doesn't miss." "I can handle gunmen," Wade said, already turning for the door. "It's not just bullets," Silas warned. "It's the past. You and Mara. This town remembers." He paused. "And secrets don't stay buried long out here. They rot in the sun." Wade rode back as evening swallowed the Tetons. The sky bruised purple and red. Smoke curled from the ranch chimney. Warm light spilled from the kitchen window. It looked welcoming. It looked false. He stabled Ash, rubbing the horse down with dry straw. As he crossed the yard, something caught his eye near the barn door. Tracks. Boot prints. Fresh. Someone had been standing there, watching the house, watching Mara. Wade drew his revolver and moved quietly onto the porch. He eased the door open. Mara stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. A pot of stew simmered on the stove. She looked up, her face draining pale. "You're back," she said. "We had company," Wade replied, sliding the gun into his holster but keeping his hand close. "Tracks by the barn." Her knife froze mid-cut. "Varr," she whispered. "Or his man. Rake." She set the knife down. Her hands trembled. "Wade, there's something else you need to know. About why Harlan took that loan, why he was so desperate for water." "He was a rancher," Wade said. "Ranchers always chase water." "No." She shook her head. Reaching into her apron pocket, she pulled out a small, heavy bundle wrapped in cloth. She placed it on the table and slowly unfolded it. Inside the cloth lay a rough stone, quartz split open by a thick, jagged vein of dull yellow metal. Wade lifted it from the table. It was heavier than it looked. He dragged his thumbnail across the surface. The metal marked easily. "Gold. He found it in the dry creek bed 3 years ago," Mara whispered. Wade's jaw tightened. That's why he kept digging wells. "He wasn't searching for water," she said quietly. "He was chasing the mother lode. He believed the source ran deep under the land, Wade stared at the nugget, its weight suddenly unbearable. Everything had just shifted. If Clayton Varr knew about this, it wasn't about cattle anymore, or water rights. "Does anyone else know?" Wade asked, his voice low and tense. "Only Harlan and me," Mara said. Then she hesitated. "And now you." But the week before he died, he wasn't himself. He kept shouting about the gold. The window was open. Dr. Warren was there. "And the doctor's assistant," Wade said sharply. Mara nodded. "A boy named Eli. He drinks at the saloon. He talks." Wade closed his eyes. The secret was already loose. Varr didn't want pasture land. He wanted a mine, and he would kill both of them to claim it. The kitchen window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor as a bullet slammed into the table. Inches from the gold, spraying splinters through the room. Mara screamed and dropped hard to the floor. Wade kicked the table over, dragging her behind it as a second shot shattered the lantern, plunging the house into darkness. "Stay down," Wade roared, drawing his Colt. From the black outside came a rasping laugh. "Welcome home, cowboy." The siege of the Double M had begun. Moonlight and shadows tore through the kitchen as more glass crunched under Wade's boots while he crawled toward the hallway door. "Stay low," he hissed. Another rifle cracked from the yard. The muzzle flash flared for a heartbeat, then vanished. The bullet punched through the wall, blasting plaster dust into the air. Suppression fire. They were closing in. "They're coming for the door," Wade whispered. He heard boots hit the porch, heavy, deliberate. Mara didn't scream. To his surprise, she didn't cry. In the darkness, Wade saw her crawl toward the corner where the double-barreled shotgun lay. "Is it loaded?" he asked. "Buckshot." "Both barrels," she answered, her voice shaking but steady. "Good. Watch the back door." "If it opens," he added, "don't ask who it is. Pull the trigger." Wade rolled to the broken window and risked a glance. Two shadows moved near the water trough. A third stood on the porch. He thumbed back the hammer of his revolver, exhaled, steadied his hand. Crack. The shot rang out. The shadow on the porch jerked and stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. A curse tore through the night, Spanish tangled with English. "Rake!" someone shouted. "He fights!" Another voice snarled from the tree line. "Burn it. Burn them out." Cold fear stabbed through Wade's chest. A gunfight he could manage. Fire, in a dry wooden house, was a death sentence. "Mara, the cellar!" Wade barked. "Go!" "I'm not leaving you," she shouted back. "They're going to torch the house," he yelled. "The root cellar's outside. I'll cover you." "No." She scrambled to him, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. "The trap door," she gasped. "In the pantry. It leads to the old storm shelter. We can wait them out." Wade didn't argue. He fired twice through the window to keep their heads down, then grabbed her hand. They rushed into the pantry, a narrow space reeking of onions and rot. Mara kicked aside the rug, revealing an iron ring set into the floor. She hauled it up. Damp earth breathed from the black opening beneath. "Get in," she ordered. "Ladies first," Wade said, pushing her gently. She dropped into the darkness. Wade followed, slamming the heavy door shut above them just as glass shattered again, and the whoosh of a burning oil lamp echoed through the parlor. They crouched together in the cramped darkness of the storm shelter. The earthen pit barely reached 5 feet high, its dirt walls lined with shelves of preserved peaches and cloudy jars of pickles. Above them, heavy boots thundered into the kitchen. "Where are they?" Rake's voice carried through the floorboards, muffled, but clear enough. "Gone. Maybe out the back." "Find the gold," Rake roared. "Tear this place apart." Wade felt Mara shudder against him. He pulled her close, wrapping one arm around her shoulders. Her heart slammed wildly against his chest, like a trapped bird fighting for escape. In the suffocating closeness of the dark, 10 years of distance collapsed into nothing. She smelled of gunpowder, and beneath it, that faint trace of lavender that had never truly left him. Above their heads, furniture crashed, plates shattered, boots paced back and forth just inches over the planks. "Boss, the fire didn't take," one man called. "Wood's too damp near the porch." "Forget the fire," Rake snarled. "We made our point. If they ain't dead, they're scared. Let 'em rot in it tonight. We own the dark." "We'll be back." The footsteps withdrew. Horses whinnied. Hooves thundered away, the sound slowly dissolving into the endless prairie. Wade didn't move for a long while. He kept his arm around Mara, his chin resting against the crown of her head. "They're gone," he finally whispered. Mara exhaled shakily and pulled free just long enough to strike a match against the stone wall. The flare lit her face, smeared with dust, eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. "They know about the gold," she said hollowly. "They won't stop." "No," Wade replied grimly. "They won't. Which means we can't stay. Not like this." He studied her in the trembling light. That small scar along her chin. He didn't remember it. The way her hands curled into fists without her noticing. "Why did you stay, Mara?" he asked before he could stop himself. "With a man like Harlan, he was cruel to you." She blew out the match, plunging them back into darkness. "Because," she whispered from the black, "he was the last connection I had left to you." The silence that followed pressed heavier than the earth above them. Wade reached out in the dark, found her hand, and squeezed once. She squeezed back. For that single night in the cold belly of the ground, there was a truce. The ghosts still lingered. But for the first time in 10 years, neither of them faced them alone. Dawn crawled over the double M like a bruise, purple and gray. Wade shoved the trapdoor open and climbed out, muscles stiff and aching. The kitchen looked like a battlefield. Flour dusted the floor like fallen snow. The table lay overturned, chairs splintered, yet the house still stood. Mara climbed out after him, brushing dirt from her black dress. She surveyed the wreckage, her jaw setting hard. Then she walked to the stove, straightened the coffee pot, and, somehow, found it unbroken. "I'll make coffee," she said. It sounded absurd in a place that had nearly burned to the ground. But Wade understood. It was defiance. "You can break my walls, but you won't break my will." "I'm riding into town," Wade said, checking the cartridges in his coat. "I need to send a telegram to the marshal in Cheyenne, though I doubt he'll ride this far over a ranch fight. And I need to see Clayton Varr." "Varr?" Mara spun toward him. "You can't walk into the lion's den. Rake will be there." "If I don't, Varr will think we're hiding in the dirt," Wade replied. "Men like him feed on fear. I need him to see I'm not starving." "Take the buckboard," she said quickly. "We'll need lumber, nails, glass, ammunition." Then she straightened. "I'm staying. You shouldn't." "Someone has to watch the land," she said firmly. "And I need to bury the gold." Wade nodded. He reached into his pocket and placed the heavy nugget in her palm. "Hide it deep," he said. "Somewhere even I wouldn't think to look." Purgatory Creek buzzed with life when Wade rolled the wagon down Main Street. The morning sun shone bright, mocking the violence of the night before. He tied the team outside the general store. then crossed the street instead, toward the building marked by polished brass letters: VAR and Cumberdale Bank and Land Trust. He pushed through the double doors. Inside, the bank was cool and hushed, smelling of ink and paper. A clerk looked up, startled by Wade's dust-covered coat and hollow eyes. "I'm here to see Clayton Varr," Wade said. The clerk swallowed. "Mr. Varr is busy." "Then tell him I'm not leaving." A smooth, confident baritone drifted down from the balcony office above. "Mr. Kellen." A moment later, Clayton Varr appeared at the top of the stairs and began his slow descent. He was a broad man wrapped in a tailored suit worth more than the entire Double M Ranch. A thick mustache framed his mouth, and his eyes shone like polished flint. He no longer looked like a cattle rustler. He looked like a politician. "Wade Kellen," Varr said pleasantly, extending his hand. "I heard you'd come back. Tragic business with your father." Wade ignored the hand. "Cut the performance," he said, his voice echoing through the quiet bank. "Your dog Rake paid us a visit last night." Varr's smile stayed in place, but something behind his eyes cooled. "Rake is enthusiastic," he replied mildly. "Sometimes he grows overly protective of my interests. I assure you, I know nothing of illegal behavior." "He riddled my house with bullets," Wade snapped. "Tried to burn it to the ground." "Did he?" Varr clicked his tongue. "Unfortunate. Sounds like a rough homecoming." He clasped his hands behind his back. "Truth is, Wade, the territory's changed. You've been gone a long time. It might be too dangerous for a man trying to rebuild." He gestured around the marble counters. "The bank is always willing to ease that burden. I can offer you a generous price for the deed, enough to send you back to Texas comfortable." "I'm not selling." Wade stepped closer. "And if Rake sets foot on my land again, I won't send him back breathing." Varr leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only Wade could hear. "You're playing a losing hand, boy. The lien comes due in 4 days, and even when debts get paid, accidents still happen." He smiled thinly. "Wells dry up, barns catch fire, widows—" He paused. "Have fragile constitutions." Wade grabbed him by the lapels and slammed him back against the teller's cage. Papers scattered. The clerk gasped. "You touch her," Wade growled, "and I'll burn this bank down with you inside it." "Sheriff," Varr called calmly. The front door swung open. Sheriff Boonhart stood there, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. His badge was dull, his eyes tired. "Let him go, Wade," the sheriff said quietly. Wade released Varr and stepped back, smoothing his coat. "Tell your master to stay off my land, Boone." "I'm the law here," the sheriff replied, though he wouldn't meet Wade's eyes. "Don't start a war you can't finish." "The war already started," Wade spat, turning away. He spent the last of his money on supplies: lumber, nails, coffee, flour, and 3 boxes of .45 cartridges. As he loaded the wagon, a hand clapped his shoulder. Wade spun, hand dropping to his gun. "Easy there," a raspy voice laughed, still jumpy as ever. The man had one eye, a limp, and smelled of horse liniment and rye. "Amos Pike." Wade grinned. Amos had been foreman of the Double M back when Wade was a boy. Age had carved deep lines into his face, but the man still stood solid. "Heard you were back," Amos said, spitting tobacco into the dust. "Also heard you stirred up the bank. That was damn foolish." "Good to see you, too," Wade muttered. "You're gonna need help," Amos said, turning serious. "Rake's got 10 men. You've got a widow and an old revolver." I can't pay you. Didn't ask for it, Amos replied. Var took my brother's farm last year. I owe him blood. Then he glanced at the loaded wagon. Besides, I always liked Mara Quinn. Woman's got backbone, more than you deserve. Wade nodded. Grab your gear. We ride in 10. The trip back was quiet. Amos rode shotgun, a Winchester resting across his knees. When they reached the ranch, the sun was sinking low. Mara stood on the porch hammering boards over the shattered window. When she spotted Amos, a real smile broke through her exhaustion. You old bastard, she called. I thought you were dead. Too mean to die, Miss Mara, Amos replied, tipping his hat. Later that night, after Amos took first watch in the barn, Wade found Mara on the porch. The air had cooled, cicadas humming in the dark. He's a good man, she said softly, staring toward the horizon. He is, Wade agreed. He leaned against the railing. I asked around town today about Rufus. Mara stiffened. And what did they say? They said he bought my father's debts, Wade replied. That he threatened to put your family on the street unless you married him. Mara turned on him, her eyes blazing. Is that what you think? She shot back. That I was sold like cattle? I don't know what to think, Mara, Wade said hoarsely. I only know I wrote to you every single week for a year. I told you I was working, saving enough money to come back for you. Then one day I got a letter saying you were Mrs. Quinn. You wrote? Her voice cracked. Wade, I never received a single letter. He went still. What? I waited, she said, tears spilling despite her efforts. I stood on this porch every day for 6 months, every sunset, every dust cloud. My father told me you'd forgotten me, said you were a drifter who found a new woman in every town. I didn't believe him. She swallowed hard. But then the letters stopped coming. From you. Wade's breath caught. I wrote dozens, to the Abilene address you gave me before I left. I never left Abilene, she whispered. Not for 6 months. I waited for word from you. The truth slammed into him. Someone intercepted them, Wade said slowly. My father, Mara whispered. He took the letters. He needed Rufus's money. He sold me, Wade. Her voice broke. But he made me believe you had abandoned me first. The realization hit Wade like a fist to the chest. 10 wasted years built on lies. The anger, the bitterness, all of it forged by one greedy old man's deception. He looked at Mara, truly looked at her, and saw the girl he once loved trapped inside a woman betrayed by every man she had trusted. I never stopped, Wade said, his voice rough. I never stopped loving you. He stepped closer. I hated you for 10 years, and I still loved you every damn day. Mara lifted her eyes to his, breath catching. Wade. He cupped her face in his calloused hands. Her skin was warm. She leaned into him, a quiet sob breaking free. We can't change what's behind us, he whispered, brushing her tear away with his thumb. But we can fight for what's ahead. I'm not running this time, Mara. I'm staying, for the land, for the gold. He lowered his voice, but mostly, for you. He leaned in, and she rose to meet him. Their kiss wasn't gentle, it was desperate. 10 years of grief and longing crashing together in one breathless moment, tasting of salt, sorrow, and a hope almost too bright to survive. Then thunder broke it apart. Hooves pounded toward the house. From the barn, Amos Pike shouted, "Riders, coming fast!" Wade pulled back, the softness in his eyes hardening into steel. He drew his revolver. "Get inside," he ordered. The war for the Double M wasn't over. It was just beginning. The riders didn't charge the house. They didn't need to. Instead, they swept across the lower pasture like a blade. From the parlor window, Wade and Mara watched torches flare against the night. Gunshots cracked, not toward the house, but into the herd. Cattle bawled in terror. Hooves thundered as the animals stampeded through the broken southern fence and vanished into darkness. "They're not killing us," Amos growled, racking his Winchester. "They're bleeding us dry." That herd was the only liquid asset listed in the will. Wade lowered his gun, jaw clenched until it ached. "If we lose the cattle, we can't show a profit." "And if we can't show profit," Mara said calmly, cold logic replacing fear, "the bank claims mismanagement before probate court. Clayton Varr wins without firing another shot. We can't stop them," she added quietly. "There are 20 of them, and 3 of us. If we ride out there, we die." The night dragged on, firelight, shouting, gunshots echoing across the valley. By dawn, silence fell. The corral stood empty. The herd was gone, scattered into the Badlands or driven off by the Iron Creek riders. The ranch was ruined. Only the gold remained. They gathered in the kitchen over bitter coffee. Morning light exposed the exhaustion etched into their faces. Amos cleaned his rifle in silence. Mara studied the map spread across the table. "We have 3 days until inspection," she said. "Without cattle, the ranch is worthless on paper. We can't pay the $3,000 lien." "We have the nuggets," Wade said, nodding toward the hidden stash beneath the floorboards. 5 pounds of raw gold. "That's close to $1,500, Mara said. "Half of what we need. It could buy us time." "Not in this town," Amos spat. "If you try to cash that gold at the assay office in Purgatory Creek," Amos Pike growled, "the clerk will flag it. Miles won't even blink. Clayton Varr will claim it came off one of his claims and have it seized before the ink dries." "Then we don't go to Purgatory?" Wade Kellen said flatly. "We ride to Cheyenne, the federal assay office." Amos frowned. "That's U.S. territory?" "Exactly," Wade replied. "Varr's reach doesn't extend to federal marshals. Cheyenne's a 2-day ride," Mara Quinn said carefully. "And the only fast route cuts straight through Black Rock Canyon. That's ambush country." "It's the only move we've got," Wade said. "Every other road puts us in Varr's hands." Before they could settle the plan, the distant rattle of wheels reached the yard. Wade turned toward the window. "Buggy." He narrowed his eyes. "It's the sheriff, and he's not alone." Sheriff Boone Hart climbed down first, followed by 2 deputies carrying shotguns. They stopped at the base of the porch. Wade stepped outside, his hand hovering close to his holster. "You're trespassing, Boone," Wade said evenly. "Unless you're here to arrest the men who stole my cattle last night." The sheriff stared at his boots, shifted his weight. "I didn't see any rustling, Wade, but I do have a warrant." "A warrant?" Wade laughed bitterly. "For what? Defending my home?" "No," Boone said quietly. He lifted a finger and pointed past Wade. "For him." Amos Pike had stepped onto the porch behind him. "For Amos Pike." "What?" Amos barked. "Outstanding warrant dated 1878, Boone read from the paper. "Horse theft, Sweetwater County." "That was 10 years ago," Amos shouted. "The charges were dropped. I've got the papers." "The courthouse burned in 80, Boone replied without emotion. "Records were lost. The complaint's been refiled." "You're coming with me." "This is Varr," Wade snarled, stepping down the porch steps. "You're stripping our defenses." The deputies raised their shotguns at once. "Don't," Boone warned, his hand on his revolver. "Don't make me kill you over an old thief. Let the law handle it." "The law?" Mara stepped forward, her voice sharp and clear. "There is no law here, Sheriff. Just Clayton Var's money talking." Amos placed a hand on Wade's shoulder. "Let it be," he said quietly. "I'm an old man." He met Wade's eyes. "I can sit in a cell a few days. You two have bigger work ahead." Amos handed over his rifle and walked down the steps. As the cuffs snapped shut, he looked back once. "Run," he said softly. "Run now." The buggy rolled away in a cloud of dust. When the sound faded, the ranch felt emptier than it ever had. It was just Wade and Mara now. The odds had shifted, from desperate to nearly impossible. "We leave tonight," Wade said. "We take the back trails. Ash is fast, but he can't carry two all the way to Cheyenne. We use the buckboard, hide the gold in feed sacks." "If they catch us on the road," Mara began. "They won't," Wade said, though doubt flickered behind his eyes. He took her hands. "I'm not losing you again, Mara. Not to Var. Not to anyone." She looked at him, and for a moment the hard edge of the frontier woman softened. She reached up, brushing her fingers along the stubble of his jaw. "Then teach me," she said. "Teach you what?" "How to use that peacemaker of yours. I can handle a shotgun, but if we're riding, I need to fight like you." They spent the afternoon behind the barn. Wade stood close behind her, his arms guiding hers as she lifted the heavy Colt. He corrected her stance, her grip, the angle of her sight. The scent of burned powder mixed with lavender in the sun-warmed air. Each shot jolted her less. By sunset, she was driving lead into a fence post 20 paces away. It wasn't just practice. It was preparation. It was trust. As dusk fell, they loaded the wagon, 5 pounds of raw gold wrapped in oilcloth and hidden inside a hollowed sack of oats, a water jug, dried beef, and every round of ammunition they owned. Wade harnessed 2 sturdy draft horses and tied Ash behind the wagon. "Why bring the saddle horse?" Mara asked. "Insurance," Wade said grimly. They rolled out under a moonless sky, avoiding the main road and heading straight toward the jagged black silhouette of Black Rock Canyon. They were running for their lives, carrying a fortune in gold with a ghost army on their trail. Black Rock Canyon split the land like a wound, a narrow twisting pass boxed in by granite walls that rose 200 feet on either side. It was the fastest route to Cheyenne, and the deadliest. The darkness swallowed starlight whole. The only sound was the grind of wagon wheels over loose shale. Wade drove the team hard, eyes scanning the canyon rim far above, knowing if death came, it would come from the heights. Beside him, Mara Quinn clutched the Winchester so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. In her long duster and low-pulled hat, she could have passed for a trail drover. But her eyes told the truth. She knew she was being hunted. "It's too quiet," she whispered, her voice nearly lost beneath the canyon wind. "Keep your eyes high," Wade Kellen murmured. "We're almost at the anvil." Ahead loomed the Devil's Anvil, a massive slab of stone balanced unnaturally over the trail, squeezing the canyon into a deadly choke point. As the wagon rounded the bend, Wade's heart slammed hard against his ribs. The path was blocked. A felled pine lay across the road, its branches clawing outward like skeletal fingers. "Trap!" Wade shouted, yanking hard on the reins. Gunfire erupted from the ridgeline above. Muzzle flashes split the gray dawn. Bullets chewed the dirt around the wagon. The lead horse screamed as a slug grazed its flank and reared violently. "Get down!" Wade roared, shoving Mara toward the wagon floor. "They're behind us, too," she cried, pointing down the trail where 3 riders thundered forward, cutting off retreat. Wade's eyes snapped left, to the steep, scree slope climbing the canyon wall. Too sharp for the wagon, but a horse, a desperate one, might make it. "We can't fight them all," Wade said grimly. He grabbed the heavy sack of oats, the gold hidden inside, and leapt from the wagon, sprinting to the rear to untie Ash. "Wade, what are you doing?" Mara shouted, scrambling down with the rifle. "You're taking the gold," he said, slinging the sack over the saddle horn and tying it tight. "Ash can climb that slope. The wagon can't. I'm not leaving you here to die. You have to." Wade seized her shoulders, eyes burning. "If they get the gold, Clayton Varr wins. If you reach Cheyenne, you save the ranch. You save us." He lifted her by the waist and swung her into the saddle. "Ride, Mara." He slapped Ash hard on the flank. "Go." As she urged the horse up the crumbling slope, Wade dove behind the wagon. He drew his Colt and fired, not to kill, but to pull every eye and every bullet toward himself. The Iron Creek riders scattered for cover. Seconds stretched. Then he saw her crest the ridge, a dark silhouette against the rising sun, before vanishing beyond the stone. She was clear. Wade turned back to the fight, firing until the hammer fell on empty steel. Click. Silence followed, thick and final. Rake rode forward slowly, cruelty etched across his face. He glanced at the empty wagon, then at the tracks climbing the cliff. "She's gone," he spat. He leaned down and smashed the butt of his pistol across Wade's temple. Darkness swallowed everything. Wade awoke to the stink of stale tobacco and the copper taste of blood. He was bound to a chair in the center of the Double M parlor. The room had been torn apart. Clayton Varr sat calmly in Harlan Kellen's old armchair, hands folded. Rake stood near the window, puffing a cigar. "You fought well," Varr said mildly, pouring himself a glass of water. "But you misunderstood something, Wade. You think I care about a few gold nuggets in a creek bed?" He rose and tore a painting from the wall. Behind it lay a surveyor's map, pinned flat, thick red lines carved through the territory. "Gold is heavy," Varr said softly. "Hard to mine." He tapped the map. "But iron." He smiled. "Iron is the future. The Union Pacific needs a spur line through Teton Pass. Steam engines need water." He leaned closer. "Your father's land is the only viable route." Wade stared. This wasn't a ranch dispute. It was empire. Varr stood to make $100,000 selling the right-of-way alone. "The inspection is tomorrow," Varr said, checking his watch. "Sign the deed, and you live. Refuse," he added calmly, "and Rake buries you in the cellar." "And Mara?" Wade rasped. "My men are tracking her," Varr replied. "She won't reach Cheyenne." Wade's chest hollowed until he saw it. Through the dusty window behind Varr, something flashed on the distant ridge. A glint, not stone, glass, a rifle lens. She hadn't run. She had come back. Wade looked at Varr and forced a crooked smile. "I'll sign," he said. "Just hand me the pen." He needed one clean second. The window exploded inward in a storm of glass. Rake screamed as the rifle slug tore through his thigh. He collapsed, his gun skittering across the floor. Wade lunged. He drove his shoulder into Varr's chest, slamming the banker into the wall like a battering ram. Breath blasted from Varr's lungs as the ink bottle shattered. Black liquid bleeding across the deed, staining it beyond repair. By the time Clayton Varr lunged for the derringer, hidden inside his vest, the front door exploded inward. Mara Quinn stood in the doorway, framed by the brutal noon sun. Smoke curled from the barrel of the Winchester in her hands. She worked the lever with a sharp metallic snap and leveled the rifle straight at the banker's chest. "Drop it, Var," she ordered. Her voice didn't tremble. It rang with the authority of the land itself. Var froze. His eyes flicked from Rake, bleeding and screaming on the floor, to the woman he had dismissed as a widow, and finally to Wade Kellen, who wiped blood from his lip and smiled with something feral in his eyes. The game was over. 10 minutes later, Sheriff Boone Hart arrived, his timing questionable, but his presence undeniable. With Rake begging for mercy and spilling everything he knew, and the railroad survey map still hanging on the wall, the evidence was impossible to deny. Var hadn't been protecting investments. He'd been building an empire. The sheriff had no choice. Iron cuffs closed around the wrists of the richest man in Purgatory Creek. 3 days later, Wade and Mara stepped into the Federal Assay Office in Cheyenne. They didn't sell the gold. They used it. The lien was paid in full. With the debt cleared, they renegotiated the railroad contract on their terms. The Double M wasn't merely saved. It was secured for generations. That evening, as the sun sank behind the jagged spine of the Tetons, the sky bleeding purple and soft fire orange, Wade found Mara standing alone on the porch. She wasn't looking at contracts. She wasn't thinking about gold. She was watching the wind ripple through the tall grass. Wade came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, breathing in lavender and the promise of rain. They weren't rich because of what lay buried beneath the soil. They were rich because the house behind them was no longer a rotting monument to bitterness and loss. It was a home. "You're staying," Mara said quietly, covering his hand with hers. Wade kissed her temple as the first stars appeared above Purgatory Creek. "I'm done running, Mara," he whispered. "I'm finally home." And that is the legend of Wade Kellen and Mara Quinn. A story of grit, of gold, and of a love that refused to die in the dust of the frontier. Because in the Old West, the greatest treasure was never what you pulled from the ground. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for giving your time to this story. Some journeys shape us, and we hope this one left a mark on your heart. There are more paths ahead, more legends of love, hardship, and redemption beneath the western sky. Please subscribe, leave your thoughts, and travel with us once again. Thank you, and God bless. Aviso Legal/Disclaimer. The stories presented here are creative expressions and may mix historical inspiration with dramatized scenes. AI tools contribute to some elements of voice, imagery, and structure. But every published story is refined by editors and creators to ensure authentic emotional impact. We honor YouTube's policies and do not generate deceptive likenesses or artificial depictions of real people. All audiovisual components are legally licensed. Any use, redistribution, or alteration of this content must be granted through written consent. Your presence here means a lot. Thank you for supporting artistic storytelling.